This matchup, Ross, who do you think favors Murktide or Temur Rhinos?
It's a close one for sure, because you normally think cheap counter spells pretty good against the sort of pseudo combo deck in Rhinos, but Rhinos has a lot of good tools. You can set up a Violent Outburst with Force of Negation backup.
Right.
You can use Violent Outburst to tap them out on their turn. That's a really important card, being one of the instant speed ways to make Rhinos. But there's another important card from the Murktide side in Ledger Shredder. When they cascade, they're automatically playing 2 spells that turn. That's going to trigger the Connive, and as the Mishra's Bauble follow-up, immediately gets that to 4 toughness. Once that gets above 4 toughness and maybe up to, a 4 or 6, it's a very good card for stabilizing the battlefield against all these Rhinos.
I think Ledger Shredder is one of the cooler upgrades for this deck in Modern. It's hard to compete with things like Ragavan and Dragon Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent. Like, these Modern Horizons cards are just outrageously powerful, but Ledger Shredder is just like almost on the same level, and it does something unique for the deck.
Yep, and no action here from Webbing on turn 2. Looks like it got a Violent Outburst in hand, and James Mangus just gonna continue to try to connive with this Ledger Shredder, maybe put some pressure on Randy, or just make a very big threat. That is the 3rd copy of Mishra's Bauble.
Now, so here we're already in turn 3 for James. Is one thing I want to point out is that I think that it's important in these Murktide decks to hold your Mishra's Baubles a little longer now, with the Connives from Ledger Shredder, with the Surveil from Dragon Rage Channeler. It has like more than just cycle potential, and if you just burn it early, a lot of times you're losing that turn 2 Ledger Shredder value. But James, waiting on turn 2, playing it, has drawn 3 baubles, but looted away at least one of them.
Yeah, looted away one on turn 2, and looks like doesn't really have a great follow-up to connive here, so gonna throw away a bolt to Webbing's face just to try to get a connive here. Maybe, regretting pitching that bauble on the first turn, because it looks like it drew a couple lands that he doesn't really need.
Yeah. But wanted to get it above 3 toughness. Just wants to get it to essentially 5 toughness as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So
all right.
Bolt going to drop Webbing to 17, and then the attack to 15. And there is a Petty Theft going to reset that Ledger Shredder. And it does set him up for this 3rd turn to be able to cascade without triggering Connive. So
yeah.
A nice card to have there in a Brazen Borrower.
Also, just waiting till end of turn means that there's no pressure from James on the following turn, right? And so, like, you just force him to tap 2 mana again, which can potentially leave the shields down for counterspell or something similar.
Yeah, and you see Mangus has 2 unused mana there, so if Webbing were to have done that in combat to save the 2 damage, then, he would have been able to replay the Ledger Shredder, and then this turn 3 Cascade would have triggered Connive.
Well, it looks like James may have missed one of the Mishra's Bauble triggers. So now I just want to be clear, chat. It's okay for you to call out mistakes. It's okay for you to call out mistriggers and stuff, but there's no need to be mean or bully. I played F&M last night. I'm pretty sure I missed a Mishra's Bauble. It's an invisible trigger. It's very easy to do in real life. Most of the time when I'm playing Bauble, I'm playing on Magic Online,
Yeah, we talk a lot about in Magic tournaments getting towards the end of the day and being tired after playing a long day of Magic, but oftentimes it's the early rounds before you really get into a rhythm that you can make those little operational mistakes.
All right, really cool play by Randy here. So James fetched, and in response to the fetch, Randy decided to play Crashing Footfalls while the shields were down, so counterspell not at the ready, and that means 2 4/4 Rhinos are coming down, and James had no Spell Pierce to stop it.
Yeah, really good timing there from Webbing. Perhaps a slight misstep for Mangus. Could have just untapped, left that fetch uncracked, but I guess wanted to get a Steam Vents and is getting punished for it if there's a counterspell in hand, but I don't think there was.
I don't think there was either. So
okay.
But interesting that it could have potentially bitten him, and heads up play by Randy to play around it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. James is gonna start the turn with Expressive Iteration. Remember, the last turn he played, he got his creature bounced and hasn't really done much since, but Randy added 8 power to the board.
Now, notably, this Expressive Iteration is the 4th type for Mangus's Graveyard. Already had Artifact, Instant, and Land, so this Unholy is going to be able to trade with a Rhino.
Yeah, and I think Randy probably paused there, maybe has Force Negation at the backup, and was just thinking about protecting one of those Rhinos. Not 100% though.
And there is another Unholy Heat in Mangus's hand, but his land drop for turn is an Otawara, so can't cast that here. Going to have an wasted mana.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. The deck plays a bunch of islands and Otawara. Like, sometimes you just can't cast 3 red spells on a turn. I think that's okay. Here comes a Volatile Burst in the middle of combat. This is going to deal 1 extra damage with the Rhino and very likely to resolve. With only 1 mana up and no Spell Pierce on the last turn, it's pretty sure that this one's going to connect as well.
Yeah, I got to figure that either had to come as the draw step or as the card that went to hand off of that iteration.
Right.
Randy Webbing, once again, trying to play around factual counterspell here, saying, I'm going to make you have the cheaper counterspells that, aren't as prevalent in these lists.
All right, but that 1 extra damage could matter off the Violent Outburst, pumping the Rhino for 1. It means that, potentially a future fetch land from James or some trample damage coming over one of those smaller creatures like Ragavan could be lethal in a spot where it might not have been lethal before.
Even without any damage, with Mangus at 14 here, there's 12 power on the battlefield. That's going to drop him to 2 if he takes it all. That means even something like a Bone Crusher Giant or Fire Ice would be enough.
Yeah.
No Bone Crushers in Webbing's list, but does have 4 copies of Fire Ice, so could see a little upstairs fire.
All right, so we got Ledger Shredder and Darcy as the follow-up for James. This is going to allow him to connive. He's going to discard a Spell Snare. And then now with Unholy Heat, can take care of one of the Rhinos while Randy's tapped out. This is going to make it so if he wants to force negation, he's going to have to pitch instead of being able to pay the mana.
Surveils a land in the graveyard off the DRC, and now it could potentially double block as a 3/3 to 2/4 on one of these Rhinos.
Yeah, this is a great defensive position for James. Let's see if Randy can find something like another Brazen Bar to break it up.
Yeah, and James does have Counterspell Expressive Iteration back. Pretty good leftovers. If Webbing doesn't have a particularly good turn here, could untap, dig for more answers with the iteration, leave up the counterspell, and be in pretty good shape.
All right, so we're going to go back Randy's way after we're done shuffling here, and we'll see if he can put up some sort of aggression. This Team of Rhinos deck is not great from playing from behind. It does have a lot of interaction, but if the board becomes overwhelming, there's no Wrath of God. There's no, way. There's Fury, I guess, but in this situation, these creatures have pretty high toughness, so it's really just a 1-for-1 trade. Ooh, looks like we have Ice from Randy. Maybe a pre-combat Ice would have been solid. Interesting. Gonna attack with both Rhinos, though. See how James wants to block.
Yeah, Fire is not going to be able to finish off the second creature after a double block here, so...
No, but you do get to kill the Ledger Shredder, which makes defense on the following turn a little bit more difficult. Yeah. But we also have Brazen Bar in Exile, too, so we can play that next turn.
Yeah, DRC can trade with that, so...
Oh, it has to attack.
Oh, yeah, true.
All right, so we're going to kill the Ledger Shredder off.
Definitely order the Shredder first, so... One Rhino comes in, that's going to drop Mangus to 10.
Oh, he had Odawara. Maybe he was contemplating bouncing it for the trample damage.
And now a bit of a precarious spot for Webbing. Has just the 1 Rhino left. If Mangus can find a third Unholy Heat or a Murktide Regent potentially. Remembers the Surveil there. I see, consider, I think there's a land. Yeah, there was a Spiral of Canal. Goes for the untapped land instead with that basic island and a consider.
Yeah. That allows them to consider and counterspell in the same turn here.
Yep.
Now, I have to imagine that James has to use counterspell on this Brazen Bar, since it does represent a lot of potential damage in the air, and it allows him to use his mana efficiently.
Yeah, so counterspell and consider in hand. Yeah, I think counterspell does get used on the end step Brazen Borrower.
It's not getting a whole lot better at this point, right?
Yeah. And at this point, with Webbing at 10, that's a 2-turn clock from the DRC and the Ragavan.
Yeah, and the Rhino's short on that clock, too,
Yeah, he's winning the race right now, but Webbing has a few cards left.
Oh, that's a good one. Backbreaker! Cleans up the 2 creatures! Welcome to Modern. That's a hard cast one, too, so it's sticking around. Rhino coming in for 4.
This consider's going to have to find something good. Ooh, we're leaving on top.
Oh, maybe it's Murktide. Murktide here would be kind of cracked, but we know that Randy does have the answer with the Odawara, so this might not be enough. James might need one more thing here to keep from dying. Let's see if he has it.
And a counterspell's not good enough because the Odawara is a channel. That's an activated ability. So yeah, it's going to need another removal spell, bounce spell, blocker to survive this turn.
All right, so we're going to exile, looks like 5 cards with only 4 counters going on it. And then we're playing a second Murktide that's going to grow the first one. That is a crazy sequence.
Leaves
from James.
5 back, so now we got a 12-12 and an 8-8. And yeah, we can Ottawa the 12-12, but 8-8 can block the Fury cleanly. You take 4, you're in a precarious spot. But then are there any more spells?
Odawara?
Oh,
And ice!
Yeah, we
Taps
did
him down in the text for the game!
Yeah.
Randy Webbing takes game 1 in awesome fashion. A really cool play from James with a double Murktide turn, but it wasn't quite enough.
And Randy getting paid off for being patient with those bounce spells. Could use them earlier to force through damage. Instead, just trades a Rhino for the Ledger Shredder and then has the necessary ways to clear through much better blockers in those 2 large Murktide regions.
Yeah, I mean, I think Murktide region is one of the better cards in this style of matchup because it's so large. It dodges a lot of the damage-based removal from the Temur Rhinos deck. But in that spot, you just saw the versatility not only of the spells, but also of the lance. Randy Webbing with that Odawara. That's not really something you can afford to play in the 4-color deck, I don't think.
Usually not, I would say. But in Temur, you get to play a little bit of a better mana base.
Yeah, plus Gemstone Caverns.
Yep.
It's cracked.
Okay, looking at the players' sideboard, starting with Randy Webbing, I see 2 copies of Throne the Last Troll, 2 Subtlety, a Magus of the Moon, an Endurance, 3 Force of Vigor, 4 Mystical Dispute, 1 Blood Moon, and 1 Beseiju who endures. Gotta say, I like the Thruns and the Disputes against a heavy counterspell strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The Thruns are here for this style of deck and also for like the blue-white deck, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. But, very effective. Just a difficult card for this deck to handle outside of just a Murktide Regent blocking. And we saw there's a lot of ways for Randy Webbing to push those blockers out of the way. On James Mangus' side, our Murktide player, I see 1 copy of Jace the Mind Sculptor, a Fury, 1 Subtlety, 1 Mystical Dispute, 1 Abrade, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Unlicensed Hearse, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Blood Moon, and 2 Dress Down. Definitely like the Flusterstorms and the Engineered Explosives for either stopping the Rhinos on the stack or stopping them from removing them from the battlefield.
Yeah.
Not sure if I like a ton else. Maybe you want your Mystical Dispute to fight Webbing's. This is closed deck list during the Swiss, but you got to expect Mystical Dispute out of the sideboard from most blue Cascade decks.
Yeah. Well, I think against most blue decks, like it's just such an efficient answer to a lot of the blue interaction, but it's also just a great answer to Murktide Regent. Oftentimes when you play against a deck like Murktide, the blue spells are what they play last, and they're also usually the most powerful, but Mystical Dispute for 1 mana can very easily counter them.
Yeah, so some good cards on both sides here, and got to imagine these main deck spell snares, 2 of those for Mangus, those are probably coming out. Not a ton of targets. Fire, Ice, and Petty Theft.
No, I'm out.
Just not enough there to.
We saw him discard it in game 1.
And discard it quickly.
Yeah. All right. Well, both players here are done sideboarding and shuffling up for game number 2. Just want to shout out some of our sponsors here for the weekend. G Fuel Energy Formula is a sponsor of Apex Gaming. We have a whole freaking cooler full of G Fuel products over in the corner. Also, shout out to Wings, etc. Grill and Pub. I know where I'm going to be tonight. It's at Wings, etc. Drinking at the bar. And then lastly,
cauliflower wings. I'm so excited. I am so excited. I cannot wait.
And lastly, thanks to Ultimate Guard. Shout out to them for sponsoring the Apex Gaming Invitational. They have given us a ton of cool products to not only sell in the store, but also to give away to our participants today. And big shout out to all 3 of those sponsors, as well as all the stores that participated in the Apex Gaming Invitational series. The 3 here today that are vending, we have Titan Games from Pennsylvania, Clutch Gaming, and Workgate, all from Ohio. Those 3 vendors here, I got to go meet some of them earlier. Really cool folks. Glad to see the community really rallying around this tournament series, and I hope there's greater things in the future for everyone.
Yeah, we've been here for a while now. We've seen it grow, and it's going to continue to grow. This has been great. Okay, players are shuffled up and drawn opening hands here. James Mangus going to be on the play. I think that is very important in this matchup, Todd. This is 2 decks that really like to play from ahead. They can play a little bit from behind, but they very much prefer to play from ahead. So, being on the play going to be really important. But here we see both players taking a mulligan.
Well, I think that's kind of the nature of Modern. It's really explosive, and so if you don't have like an early answer to a Ragavan, or if you don't have a play on turn 1 or turn 2, I think that's a pretty easy throwback. Like you need to have pressure and interaction on both sides of it, and and mana. So like that's a pretty tough ask, and so like you can see these players pretty aggressively mulliganing mediocre hands as well as the hands without mana.
Yeah, Modern definitely such a high-powered format these days. Since Modern Horizons 2, that you can afford to be down a card as long as you're doing your thing early, coming out ahead, and especially on Manga's side, has some cheap interaction. You know, we now have 2 copies of Flusterstorm, that Minor Misstep, and the Spell Pierce from the main deck. That's 4 good 1-mana counter spells that can help stop some of these early cascades. I think having one of those really important for him, along with having some early threats to make webbing, you know, have to play reactive a little bit.
All right, who do you think is favored if they both go down to like 5 cards? A low resource game, who do you think that's going to favor?
Low resource game, I think, would favor webbing, just because, you know, he has a lot of cards that can count as 2. If you ever get to the point where you're hard casting some of these pitch elementals, all the cascades into Rhinos, you know, even Brazen Borrower can be a bounce spell and a threat. So I think just more sort of inherent card advantage from his stuff. But here we see Mangus looks like kept on 6 and webbing going to 5. So, you know, down a card, the complexion of that changes.
Oh, for sure. I like what you're saying about the low resource game. I do agree that the Temur Rhinos does play well on low resources. As long as they have 3 mana, you know, a lot of their cards do generate virtual 2-for-1, sometimes even 3-for-1 if you count like Shardless Agent. You know, that's a body. The body matters. You often have to trade or block it, you know.
And even if they have the counterspell, you've traded for a counterspell and gotten a 2/2 out of it.
Right. A lot of the Temur Rhinos has a lot of pitch cards too, though, and those get a lot weaker when you're on low cards.
If you have to pitch them, and we see a Gemstone Caverns in Randy Webbing's hand, that's normally a card you'd love to have on the draw, but on 5 cards, can't really afford it to exile an extra one to get that tempo boost.
Here's what I say. I say that I will always keep a Gemstone Caverns because the pitch is irrelevant, right? You just pitch any other card, and it's like you stole the play because you get to draw on your first turn, which is kind of like your second turn.
But you're already down a card.
Who cares? You get to play first. You're literally the exact same amount of resources, except you stole the play.
But those resources get more important the more you mulligan. I gotta say, I disagree with there. And Webbing seems like he agrees with me because he sent that Gemstone Caverns at the bottom.
You would still choose to play given the option, right?
Yeah.
But so you're getting to play, but you also get to draw a card on your first turn. It is always better to play Gemstone Caverns. I'll tell you that much. It might not seem like it, but it is. Anyway, Turtle and Ragavan from James. Not a whole lot of 1-mana things in Randy's deck to interact with it, so this thing's gonna hit. Reveals Gemstone Caverns. Not unlucky, as they say.
Yeah, no dead gone here. That is the one way to interact unless you want to pitch for a Fury.
Interesting Prismatic Vista seeing play in Temur Rhinos. You don't see that one a ton because it can't fetch Ketra Triumph. But maybe valuing basics for like post-Sideboard games with like Blood Moon.
Yeah, potentially thinking the Izzet Murktide players would have more main deck Blood Moons for this tournament. You know, we've seen an increase in decks like Amulet Titan where Blood Moon is important. So maybe Webbing trying to go next level there. No main deck Blood Moons for Mangus today in his build of the deck, though.
All right, going back Randy's way. Let's see if he has a 2-mana way to stop the Ragavan, or if James has some counterplay. Peeks at a hand, looks like a Fury, a blue card with white bordering. Can't tell what it is.
I think I see a Fire Ice.
I do see a Fire Ice.
Yeah.
I'm curious when Randy wants to deploy it, because right now Counterspell hits it, Spell Pierce hits it always. And if he wants to wait till attack step, that prevents a dash Ragavan from hitting him. That does open him up.
Yeah, it says I can't really play around a counterspell because you have the mana open, so I might as well play around second Ragavan. Makes sense to me.
James starts the turn by attacking with the Ragavan before making any plays. Let's see what Randy wants to do. Gonna take it. Gonna maybe wait till the end step to Fire Ice. Interesting. Reveals a Fire Ice. We'll see if James wants to cast it or play some other threats here.
Yeah, could just get a free card playing the ice side.
Has Flusterstorm in hand, so relatively insulated from something like a Cascade spell next turn.
Yeah, things looking very good here for Mangus. You know, obviously when your opponent mulligans to 5, that's great. But getting a Ragavan going as well, that mana advantage is so huge. It gives Mangus a lot of freedom to just play to the battlefield, get his threats down without having to worry about counterplay from Webbing because you have the mana to hold up your counter spells as well.
All right, looks like we have a Fortnite basic from Randy Webbing, says Twitch chat. I'm unfamiliar with the basics in that regard, but I know that was one of the secret layers that they came out with last year.
I barely know what Fortnite is.
It's a shooter game where you build stuff.
It is a shooter game is the extent of my knowledge.
Okay, well,
I believe it is quite popular among the youth of today.
It was. I don't think it's that popular anymore, but we'll see. All right, back James's way, Randy, just with land number 3 and a pass. Low on resources, but has a couple things in hand that he might want to do. He's going to go for fire here. 1 Ragavan, 1 face. We'll see if James wants to interact and chooses not to. Going to let it fall.
Interesting. Had the Flusterstorm, chooses to just let the Ragavan die. Says, I'd rather spend my turn doing other things.
I mean, it's hard to blame him, right? Like, you know, Ragavan's just a little threat, and if you fight over the fire ice, there's some chance you just get obliterated on the following turn.
Yeah, and the Ragavan already got good value, so...
Right. 2 treasures, 2 hits, a draw card off the ice.
Looks like for as ahead, Mangus is on resources, doesn't have a lot of counter spells, and needed to make more land drops. So finds both a Spiral of Canal to be exiled and a Steam Vents, I believe, went to hand. So he's going to be able to make his land drops, which was important, and has a replacement Ragavan. So this all makes sense for why the first one bit the dust with no counterplay.
Yep, has 2 treasures at the ready here. Can play at least 1 Flusterstorm that we know of. And looks like 2 Flusterstorms, or 2 Murktide regions.
Yeah, it looks like 2 Murktide regions. Oh, is that 2 Lightning Bolts or just 1?
It's a couple red cards. I don't know what one of them is. Maybe it's a promo Lightning Bolt full art.
But either way, things looking very good here for Mangus. That Flusterstorm going to be able to prevent a Cascader all the way until Webbing gets to 6 lands. Because they play 2 spells with the Cascade card and the card you Cascade into. And then the Flusterstorm says counter unless you pay 3.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why decks play Flusterstorm in this format over something like Spell Pierce in their sideboards. While Spell Pierce hits a wider variety of targets, like Blood Moon, Chalice of the Void, these artifacts and enchantments, even Planeswalkers, the Flusterstorm is harder to interact with because it creates those storm copies, and it's often more explosive at stopping those Cascade cards.
Yeah, so powerful against all these Cascade decks. And as I've noted, you know, Cascade is quite popular here on the Apex series. So Mangus, I think, wisely tuning his deck to be better in those matchups.
All right, this is some blue card I've never seen.
Is that a Spell Snare?
This cannot be a Spell Snare. It is in a Temur Rhinos deck.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Mystical Dispute. Okay, so we went for Mystical Dispute on the Ledger Shredder for 1 mana, and what that ended up doing was tapping low for James. Now, this is allowing for Connive with this sequencing. I would have loved, with the Mystical Dispute being paid for, just go ahead and fire the Ragavan, because this free loot is huge for this deck.
Yeah, could have fired with the Shredder on the stack still.
All right, we're going to go back Webbing's way.
Once again, Mangus choosing not to fight over his Ragavan with that Flusterstorm. And I got to say that makes sense with the Murktides back in hand. His hand is very threat dense, so there's no reason to protect the extra ones when you have so many replacements. Got to save that Flusterstorm for a better card like a Cascader into Crashing Footfalls.
All right, we're going to main phase fetch Scalding Tarn here. You have to imagine we're going to be hard casting that Fury. We want to get the Ledger Shredder off the table, but we also don't want to be pitching because we are so low on resources. James, relatively low here. We'll need... I don't even know a 1-mana card that really stops a hard cast Fury here. I can't think of one off the top of my head, so it looks like it's probably going to resolve.
Yeah, going to need to get a blue Elemental Blast for that one.
Yeah. Maybe they'll put those in Modern Horizons 3.
I wouldn't put it past them.
All right, Fury going to take down... Oh, they'll make a draw card or something, right? Kill a blue card, draw card. Great.
Yeah, that's only for green.
Okay. Fury does take care of the Ledger Shredder. Now, James going to go back his way. Let's see what he starts the turn with. A second Ledger Shredder. We know about multiple Murktides in hand. We're going to go for a Bolt that's going to trigger Connive. And I have to imagine Big Papa Mercs coming next. Going to discard Darcy. Puts a counter. Says go. Going to be protective with the Flusterstorm.
Yeah, so we'll see if Randy can produce 6 land Cascader. And doesn't have it. Really just so light on resources from those mulligans.
If I'm James, I'm not even that afraid of a Cascader at this point. With an Unholy Heat in hand, Murktide, a grip full of just like powerful cards, you can kind of grind through the Rhinos pretty easily. I would not be surprised to see a Murktide deployed here, especially now that he finds an engineered explosives, and James is definitely in the driver's seat.
Gets to put that one in his hand, make sure Webbing doesn't know about it, and now can play a Murktide Regent, still have a counter spell up, be able to deal with Rhinos should they come down. And honestly, yeah, those Rhinos not that scary when you have all of this flying power, and Webbing's already down to 10 life. So I think this game is going to end rather quickly, and we will be heading to a decider.
Yeah, so Randy here are going to need a lot of help to get around the Murktide, but also to fight through the Flusterstorm that's still in hand, as well as any other counter magic that's there. I mean, the primary source of damage from Randy is those Rhinos, and with Engineer Explosives at the ready, just going to need so much help.
And yeah, because Mangus has that second Murktide, not going super big here on the first one, just making it a 4/4, exiling one of those 2 spells.
All right, going to discard Bauble off the Connive. Missed a point there by doing this post-combat, but you do want to do things after attacking sometimes, because attacks kind of force your opponent into acting, and you want your opponent to act before you make your decision so that you have perfect information.
Webbing draws, doesn't have much left going on, and scoops up a game 2. So our players knotted at 1 game apiece. Gonna play a third game here. Webbing gotta, think, okay, I won game 1, pretty handily. Game 2 fell victim to a couple rough mulligans. If I can just get a solid 7 here in game 3, I'm on the play. Gotta feel good about that.
Yeah, for sure. You hate to see a mulligan to 5, but these decks do aggressively mulligan, and they also operate on low resources quite well. While he got ran over in that game, it's mostly because that Eternal and Ragavan went unchecked for 2 turns. And that's just a recipe for disaster no matter what you're playing.
Yeah, and we saw Mangus was actually light on lands early in that game. So if that Ragavan had been answered early, could have been a much tougher proposition trying to cast those expressive iterations to find additional land drops. Could have opened up a window for Webbing to get something going.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if the Ragavan on turn 1 was a Dragon Rage Channeler instead. That's an entirely different game where Webbing has, at least 3 more turns to continue operating because... his opponent, Magnus, was just like not doing a whole lot with this mana.
Yeah, and there you see in both those games the power of these two decks: the unchecked Ragavan, and then the very cheap interaction when you get that mana advantage in the early game, making it impossible for Webbing to come back. And in game 1, it was the power of those Rhinos, hard to deal with. Now, the one thing we do see in the post-sideboard games are those engineered explosives from Mangus's side. That could really change the texture of this matchup by giving him a clean way to catch up and answer at parity those 2 Rhinos if they come down early.
All right, looks like both of our backup matches are finished. Do we have an update on Connor Mullally and see if he won his match?
That's Connor in the background there, and it's generally hard to get a great read from him, but I didn't like the look on his face. I'll just say that. He's smiling a bit now, but that first look was man, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. And maybe Webbing about to get a look like that on his face after taking a mulligan here to start game 3.
Yeah. All right. Not very happy. Quick mulligan. Has a look on his face like, not like this. Not like this. Not like this.
I'm the defending champion.
Yeah.
I want to put up a good result here. And deck not cooperating so far. But like we said, this is a very powerful format. You can easily recover from a single mulligan here. Mangus, though, keeping his 7, likes what he sees.
All right. We're going to take a look at our 6er. Gonna take a look at Majora's Mask.
I think we're getting thoughts on what to put back, so I think we're getting a keep.
All right. Players are about ready here. Randy does have to put 1 back. Definitely going to put back that Crashing Footfalls. I guess not definitely. Suspending it on turn 1 in this matchup's not that bad. You create a pressure point on turn 5 that might actually allow you to force through one of the Rhinos.
Also, a much easier Crashing Footfalls to resolve through Flusterstorm.
Right.
When you've only played 1 spell and all your mana is untapped.
All right. Let's see if he kept it or not. All right, didn't keep it, put it on bottom. We're going to lead with a Ketra Triumph.
I see a Brazen Borrower.
I thought I saw Endurance as well, but it might be a different green thing poking out. All right, turn 1 Bauble. Going to look at our own top of deck, and that's going to give us a little more information so we can either choose Fetch Land or not. We're going to go ahead and burn a second Bauble just to look for a threat, it seems like.
I think that was a Forest on Webbing's.
Forest as well. That means he's insulated from Blood Moon if that is something that James wanted to bring in here. We got the turn 1 Ragavan. It's a little bit worse on the draw than it is on the play. We'll see if Randy has some of his 2-drop answers. I know he has at least a Brazen Borrower.
Yeah, but bouncing a 1-drop is not great. I don't see any red cards in Webbing's hand. I think I do see the Crashing Footfalls, though. So
Okay.
I guess deciding to say, I want to get this Catch-Ray Triome down, and I'm okay waiting a turn for the Rhinos.
All right. Remembers the baubles triggers. Drew 2. Back Randy's way. Ooh,
I
picked up a Fire Ice, maybe? Or had it
Okay,
all
I think
along?
that, yeah, I think there was a Fire Ice. I think I also see a Dispute there.
Yeah. I feel like this has to be a main phase. You don't mind the dash Ragavan on turn 2. If my opponent spends turn 2 dashing a Ragavan and hitting me, I'm usually fine with it. Decides to go for Suspend Footfalls and may just get obliterated by this Ragavan as a result.
Wow, playing a little loose against the Ragavan is Randy Webbing. I guess not too concerned about the monkey despite watching it run roughshod over him in game 2.
All right, well, Ragavan doesn't reveal anything scary. Misty Rainforest is the look. James with access to 3 mana now thanks to the treasure. Let's see if he can use it all or wants to use it all. Looks like he's summoned a Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, I think there's a Shredder there, but no second spell to play. So once again, maybe regretting playing that second Bauble on turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I love holding baubles in the builds with Ledger Shredder these days. And the fact that he burned 2, to me, signified maybe a bit of weakness, that maybe he didn't have either of the Ledger Shredders and just wanted to draw more pressure to go with the Ragavan.
Yeah, well, that Shredder does meet a dispute, so no punishment there. Looks like Webbing drew a Fiery Islet, so I think the hand there is just 2 lands, a Brazen Borrower, and a Fire Ice. Decides not to main phase the Fire Ice.
Now waiting, I think, is okay, right? Now a Dash Ragavan's kind of scary.
Yeah, and there's the treasure there, so you weren't going to resolve the Fire Ice through any of the 1-mana counter spells. You do open yourself up to actual counter spell by waiting.
Yeah, but if your opponent burns a counterspell on your fire, that's usually pretty fine.
Mangus says that's fine. Damage splits 1-1, so Mangus is going to fall to 16. And the monkey is down. But this combat, there's another Shredder. Consider now to connive immediately. Draws an iteration. That's a nice one.
Keeps it on top.
It's just a lightning bolt to the connive. Also makes sense to get that one out of the way since it doesn't deal with a Rhino. I do believe there's an Unholy Heat back with Delirium. There's an iteration back, but I don't think I see any counter spells. So if there's a Cascader off the top for Webbing, we could be doing something. Could be in business.
All right. Footfall's gonna get suspended again.
No Cascader, instead another Crashing Footfalls, and yeah, with just a Brazen Borrower in hand, there's just not a lot going down for Webbing. And now, if you're Mangus, the goal here is I want to find counter spells for these suspended Footfalls. So
yeah,
that's
but you
what
have
I'm
plenty
digging
of
for with this
time,
iteration.
right? That's the thing. You have plenty of time because Randy didn't suspend on 1.
And there's another iteration, so we're going to be able to dig even further into our deck.
Finds counterspell Flusterstorm 2. My guess gonna put one of the counterspells in hand. Might just fire off another iteration looking for mana sources so he can play something.
Yeah, and I think at this point with the Footfalls in suspend, the Flusterstorm not looking great.
Right.
As much as we've touted it in this matchup, the complexion of this game has made it not as good. Yeah, gonna cash in the treasure to play this iteration, so that if he gets a land off of it, he can play that land. Gets another Cascade. I think that might have been a Murktide drawn. Not sure.
All right, discard the Consider to the Connive. Now we're going to resolve the Expressive. Looking for a mana to play, something for free anyway. Finds a Spell Snare.
Spell Snare, Flooded Strand counter spell. So yeah, Spell Snare goes to the bottom. We get our land drop. We get another counter spell, and that's exactly what he needed. You know,
see, I kind of like keeping the Spell Snare, honestly. Gets punished. Brazen Bar are going to bounce. Ledger Shredder now. Back in hand. Only 1 mana up for James. I'm curious if he has any 1 mana interaction. This could be a window for Randy to resolve something big.
but he's empty-handed, so it's got to come off the top.
Yeah, but if he draws a land, he has a redraw with the Fiery Islet as well. Shardless Agent. We're going to get this down.
That
Here comes
what he needed.
The Rhinos. All right.
And there's going to be more Rhinos coming.
Yep.
So that is 10 power from 1 card on the 1 turn that Mangus opened the window.
All right. We'll see if he wants to fetch Shock here and do this instep, or just do it tapped and cast him next turn.
Yeah, Mangus does have an Unholy Heat to deal with one of these Rhinos. And then the Shredder can at least check the Shardless Agent. So ultimately not, the end of the world here for Mangus, but now it's not go for the throat time anymore. It's okay, I've got to clear these up. And then
Now
you
it's
might
work.
have to dodge some stuff. Oh god. Okay.
Okay,
I
don't
take it
have to
back.
do anything. Everything's fine. Engineering explosives. Now we can play E on 0, wait for the second one to resolve, and then blow it up before anything even happens. We can even
Yeah.
play Ledger Shredder too to get a free connive.
That does take counter spell down, but your opponent's empty-handed. You're gonna get clear a bunch of rhinos. Yeah, that was for as good as the webbing's draw there was with the Shardless Agent, the engineered explosives just said, no, it doesn't matter.
It's so sick too because it actually just cleans up 2 different crashing footfalls in the same time, and there's nothing Randy can do to stop it. The way that suspend works, it's this old mechanic or whatever that got reprinted, but the way that suspend works is it's a forced cast if you can cast it, and so like you can't wait a turn on your triggers. All right. We have another Rhinos coming in. I have to imagine this E is going to clean things up, so Randy's going to need some help. Attack for 8, but E going to blow him up.
Does decide to not take the 8, so if there's another Cascader here.
All right, going to pop the islets. To me, that means probably a land or a dead draw, looking for any action. Found the Brazen Borrower, so can bounce Murktide or the Ledger Shredder if he wants.
That's just not really going to get him anywhere, and Mangus has a loaded hand here with multiple counter spells and a Murktide Regent, so things just not looking great for Randy Webbing. This time, I'm not going to say it was entirely being down on cards, but his 6 just not great. Drew multiple Crashing Footfalls instead of extra Cascaders. Didn't have the immediate interaction for the Ragavan. Just kind of a mass 6 here, and Mangus once again running away with the game, getting that early boost of mana.
All right, we're going to main phase a Murktide Regent, maybe trying to get Connive. If there was any sort of reactive spell, we could spell Pierce and Connive. We're going to get in for 2 damage, and Randy here going to fetch.
And yeah, there's a Petty Theft here that can bounce the Murktide Regent. But honestly, at this point, Mangus might be perfectly willing to just counter that. Try to get this game over with.
Yeah, I mean, with very few cards in Randy's hand, this Brazen Borrower Petty Theft represents his last resource. We have Spell Pierce for that, and then we still have Counterspell at the ready for the next play. So I feel like this one's locked up pretty well. Gonna go end of turn. Petty Thefts.
That one meets the Spell Pierce.
Yeah, we even get a Connive off of it, so we get to grow. Gonna pitch an extra land back Randy's way. Let's see what the draw step is.
There's got to be 2 heaters in a row because you got to clear through these 2 counter spells. Oop. We're calling a judge.
Maybe curious on a rules interaction here. We'll see what it's all about, but oh, maybe not. Looks like James just passed the turn. Maybe someone asked him a question. It looked like a judge call. My apologies.
And there's a Flusterstorm too, so I think that just about locks it up.
All right, that's dead gone, and we're going to use that to bounce something.
Yeah. So using the gone side means Flusterstorm can hit it, and now you've got 2 counter spells up. You can counter the Crashing Footfalls. You can counter whatever webbing draws.
Well, they don't even fly. I don't even know that I would bother countering the Crashing Footfalls. Like, you're at 15, you can take a hit for 8 damage. With Randy all the way down to 7, you literally just want to protect your stuff. But with something like Otawara could change that because it's uncounterable. All right, draws for turn.
Otawara would buy webbing a turn here, but it's not really getting him anywhere.
We do have the blocker and Brazen Borrower, so we're not technically dead on board. Something like a cascade effect doesn't do enough.
The Petty Theft got countered, so there's no borrower.
There's still 1 borrower left from earlier.
Oh, from earlier, sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, Randy extends the hand, and our previous champion is defeated in round number 1. James Magnus takes it down with Izzet Murktide. The deck to beat today, I think, Izzet Murktide.
Yeah, it's sort of been the deck to beat for a while now in Modern. The most played deck by a significant margin here, and you saw why. The power of Ragavan, all the good cheap interaction. Ledger Shredder looked great there. There was maybe 6 connives over those last couple games.
Yeah.
And Murktide Regent coming down late to clear things up. So yeah, just a very solid deck in Izzet Murktide, and we're going to see a lot of it today, and I imagine it will do a lot of winning.